The whiskey burned going down, but Victoria Lang barely felt it anymore as she stumbled out of the Silver Spur Saloon into the harsh New Mexico sunlight. Her 22nd birthday already half forgotten in an amber haze that had started 3 years ago and never quite lifted. The dusty street of Pinos Altos swam before her eyes, the wooden buildings seeming to lean toward one another like gossiping old women, and she pressed her palm against the weathered wall to steady herself before taking another swig from the bottle she'd managed to smuggle out past the bartender who'd stopped caring about her tabs months ago. "Miss Lang, you all right there?" A voice cut through the fog in her head, deep and concerned, though she couldn't quite make out who it belonged to through the glare and her own swimming vision. "Just fine," she slurred, waving a dismissive hand that nearly sent her toppling sideways. Never been better, as a matter of pure fact. Strong hands caught her before she hit the dirt, and when her vision finally focused, she found herself staring up into the most startlingly clear gray eyes she'd ever seen, set in a sun-bronzed face beneath the brim of a dusty black Stetson. The man holding her upright looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair just visible beneath his hat and a jaw that could have been carved from the surrounding mountains. "Doesn't look fine to me," he said, his voice gentler than his grip. "When's the last time you ate something that wasn't liquid?" Victoria tried to pull away, but her legs had turned to water. "What's it to you, stranger? I don't recall asking for your opinion on my dietary choices." "Name's Cole Wyatt," he said, not letting go, even as she struggled weakly. "And I'm making it my business because you're about to collapse in the middle of the street, and I've got a feeling the horses coming this way won't stop in time." She heard the thunder of hooves then, felt him pull her bodily out of the road and onto the wooden sidewalk as a freight wagon rolled past, the driver cursing at the delay. Her bottle slipped from her fingers and shattered on the boards, whiskey pooling like spilled tears. "My drink," she protested, but the words came out wrong, twisted and childish. "You've had enough," Cole said firmly, and something about the certainty in his voice made her want to cry, though she couldn't have said why. "Where do you live? I'll see you home." "Don't have one," Victoria admitted, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. "Got a room at the boarding house when I remember to pay for it. Mrs. Henderson throws me out every other week." Cole's expression shifted, something that looked almost like pain flickering across his features. "Well, that's no way to live. Come on then. The restaurant down the street will give you some coffee and food, and then we're going to have a conversation about this." "I don't want to have a conversation," Victoria said, but she let him guide her anyway, because the ground still felt unreliable beneath her feet, and his arm around her waist was the only solid thing in a world that had been spinning for far too long. The restaurant was blessedly dim and cool after the blazing street. Cole settled her into a chair in the corner and ordered coffee and stew without asking what she wanted. Victoria slumped against the table, her head swimming with confusion and shame and something else she couldn't quite name. Through the haze, she studied him as he spoke quietly with the waitress, a woman named Martha who'd known Victoria's mother before the fever took her 4 years back. "Poor thing," Martha murmured, loud enough for Victoria to hear. "She wasn't always like this, you know. Used to be the sweetest girl. Helped her mama with the sewing and everything." "What happened?" Cole asked, and Victoria closed her eyes, not wanting to hear Martha tell the story, but unable to stop it. "Her daddy died in the mines when she was 15, cave in. Then her mama got sick with the fever that went through town in 78. Victoria was 18, all alone, and she just fell apart. Started drinking to forget, I suppose, and never stopped. Been 3 years now of this slow decline. Breaks my heart to see it. 3 years. Had it really been that long? Victoria's memory of that time was fragmented, pieces missing like gaps in a fence. She remembered the day they had brought her father's body up from the mine, remembered holding her mother's hand as the fever burned through her, remembered the first time she'd stolen a bottle of whiskey from the general store and drunk herself into blessed numbness. Everything after that was a blur of bottles and bad decisions and waking up in places she didn't remember going to. The coffee appeared before her, steam rising in delicate spirals. Cole pushed the cup toward her. "Drink," he said, and it wasn't a request. She drank, and the heat of it shocked her system, after nothing but alcohol for she didn't know how long. The stew came next, thick with beef and vegetables, and her stomach cramped at the sight of real food. She picked up the spoon with shaking hands. "I can feed myself," she muttered when Cole moved as if to help. Didn't say you couldn't, he replied, settling back in his chair. I'm just making sure you do. They sat in silence while she ate, slowly at first, and then with increasing hunger, as her body remembered what it was like to be nourished by something other than whiskey. The fog in her head began to lift, just a little, just enough for mortification to creep in around the edges. Why are you doing this? She asked finally, unable to meet his eyes. You don't know me? I'm just another drunk in a town full of them. Cole was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the table in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. My brother was like you, he said at last. Drank himself to death by the time he was 25. Started after the war, couldn't shake what he'd seen. I watched him waste away, and I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. When I saw you stumbling out of that saloon just now, I saw him. Figured maybe I could do for you what I couldn't do for him. The rawness in his voice cut through Victoria's defenses like a knife through butter. She set down her spoon, her appetite suddenly gone. I'm sorry about your brother, but I'm a lost cause. Everyone in town will tell you the same. I don't believe in lost causes, Cole said, and the conviction in his words made her chest ache. Only people who've given up. And I don't think you've completely given up yet, or you wouldn't be sitting here eating this food. Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was beyond saving. But the truth was, some small part of her that wasn't drowned in alcohol wanted desperately to believe him, wanted to believe that there was a way back from the edge she'd been teetering on for 3 years. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I want you to let me help you, Cole said simply. I've got a ranch about 5 miles outside town. It's not much, just me and a couple of hired hands, but it's honest work and clean living. Come work for me. Help with the cooking and the cleaning, tend the garden, stay sober. Give yourself a chance to remember who you used to be. It was the most absurd offer Victoria had ever received. She was a drunk, unreliable, and broken. Why would this stranger trust her with anything, let alone a position on his ranch? But as she looked into his steady gray eyes, she saw no pity there, only genuine concern and a stubborn kind of hope that refused to be extinguished. I'll mess it up, she warned. I always do. I'll find a bottle and ruin everything. Then we'll deal with it when it happens, Cole said. But I've got a feeling you're stronger than you think you are, Victoria Lang. Your mama didn't raise a quitter. The mention of her mother nearly broke her. Tears welled up in her eyes, the first real tears she'd shed in years that weren't just drunken self-pity. My mama would be ashamed of what I've become. Maybe, Cole allowed, reaching across the table to cover her trembling hand with his own. His palm was warm and calloused from hard work, solid and real. But I think she'd be proud if you decided to change. It's not too late. It's never too late as long as you're still breathing. Victoria stared at their joined hands, at the stark contrast between his strength and her weakness. She thought about the last 3 years, about the mornings she'd woken up not knowing where she was or what she'd done the night before. She thought about the disappointed looks from people who'd known her as a child, the way they crossed the street to avoid her now. She thought about the taste of whiskey that had become as familiar as water, the way it dulled everything until she couldn't feel the grief anymore, but couldn't feel anything else either. And then she thought about the possibility of something different, something better, a chance to be someone other than the town drunk. Okay, she heard herself say, the word falling from her lips like a prayer. Okay, I'll try. Cole's face broke into a smile that transformed his serious features, making him look younger and lighter. That's all I'm asking for. Just try. The rest will come. He paid for the meal over Martha's protests, then guided Victoria back out into the afternoon sun. The world still felt unsteady beneath her feet, but his presence beside her was an anchor, keeping her grounded. They walked to the boarding house where she kept her few possessions in a room she rarely saw the inside of while sober. Mrs. Henderson was sweeping the porch when they arrived, her expression pinching when she saw Victoria. Miss Lang, you're 3 weeks behind on your rent. I'll need payment by tomorrow, or I'm clearing out your room. She won't be needing the room anymore, Cole said, before Victoria could respond. She's coming to work at my ranch. I'll pay what she owes and collect her things. Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows shot up nearly to her graying hairline. Your funeral, she muttered, but she took the money Cole offered and stepped aside to let them pass. Victoria's room was a disaster, clothes strewn everywhere, empty bottles littering every surface. The shame of it burned through the alcohol still in her system, making her feel sick. This was what she'd become. This chaos was her life. "It's not too late to change your mind," she said as Cole surveyed the wreckage. He just shook his head and started gathering her clothes, folding them with surprising care. "Get whatever else you need. We'll burn the rest." Together, they packed her belongings into a single worn carpet bag that had belonged to her mother. It was pathetically little to show for 22 years of life, but Victoria supposed that was fitting. She'd thrown away everything that mattered, and this was all that remained. The ride out to Cole's ranch sobered her further, the fresh air and sunshine burning away the fog in her head and leaving behind a pounding headache and a growing sense of dread. What had she agreed to? She didn't know this man, didn't know if she could trust him, didn't know if she could trust herself. But when the ranch came into view, something in her chest loosened. It was small but well-maintained, with a tidy house, a barn, corrals for the horses, and fields stretching toward the mountains beyond. It looked like a place where a person could heal, if they were brave enough to try. Cole helped her down from the horse, steadying her when her legs wobbled. "The hands are out checking fences, but they'll be back for supper. I'll show you your room, let you rest a bit. We can talk more tonight when you're feeling better." The house was clean and simply furnished, clearly the domain of a man who lived alone but took pride in his space. Cole led her to a small bedroom off the main living area, with a window that looked out over the mountains and a bed that appeared infinitely more comfortable than the lumpy mattress at the boarding house. "Bathroom's down the hall," he said, setting her bag on the floor. "There's a lock on your door. You're safe here, Victoria. I want you to know that. I'm not expecting anything from you except honest work and honest effort." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight. "Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just about your brother. There's got to be more to it." Cole leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. "When I came back from the trail drive last spring, I was lost. Didn't know what I wanted from life. Didn't feel like I had a purpose beyond moving cattle from one place to another. Then I bought this ranch, started building something that was mine. It gave me direction, gave me a reason to get up in the morning. I think everyone needs that. A purpose, a reason. Maybe helping you find yours will help me solidify my own." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years. Victoria nodded slowly, not trusting herself to speak. Cole seemed to understand, because he just tipped his hat and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Alone in the room, Victoria sat on the edge of the bed and let herself shake. Her body was already craving alcohol, the familiar itch starting beneath her skin. It would be so easy to sneak back to town, find a bottle, quiet the screaming need that was building with each passing minute. Instead, she lay down on the bed and pulled the quilt over herself, breathing through the waves of nausea and anxiety. This was going to be harder than she'd thought. This was going to be the hardest thing she'd ever done. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she'd thought long dead, a tiny spark of hope flickered to life. When Victoria woke, the room was dark and her head was pounding. For a moment, she didn't know where she was, panic flooding through her until memory returned. The ranch. Cole Wyatt. The impossible promise she'd made to try. Light spilled from beneath her door, and she could hear voices in the main room. Male voices, laughing and talking over the clatter of dishes. Her stomach growled, reminding her that the stew at lunch had been the most substantial meal she'd had in weeks. She dragged herself out of bed and looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. Her brown hair was a tangled mess, her face pale and drawn, dark circles beneath her green eyes. She looked like death warmed over, which was fitting given how she felt. There was a basin of water on the dresser, and she splashed her face, trying to make herself presentable. Her hands were still shaking, and the craving for a drink was a living thing inside her, clawing at her insides. But she'd made a promise, however tentative, and she was going to keep it, at least for tonight. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Cole and two other men seated around a rough-hewn table laden with food. All three looked up at her entrance, and she felt herself flush under their scrutiny. "There she is," Cole said warmly, rising from his chair. "Feeling better?" "Not particularly," Victoria admitted, because lying seemed pointless. "But I'm here. That's what counts." Cole gestured to the other men. "This is Jake and Samuel. They work the ranch with me. Gentlemen, this is Victoria Lang. She'll be helping out around here." Jake was younger, maybe 20, with sandy hair and an easy smile. Samuel was older, perhaps in his 40s, with weathered features and kind eyes. Both nodded politely, though she could see the questions in their expressions. "Pleased to meet you, miss," Jake said. "We don't get much in the way of company out here, so it'll be nice having someone else around." Samuel just grunted in agreement and went back to his food, which Victoria appreciated. She didn't think she could handle much conversation. Cole pulled out a chair for her, and she sat gingerly, very aware of how fragile she felt. The food before her was simple, but plentiful. Beans and cornbread and salt pork, the kind of meal that working men needed. Her stomach rebelled at the sight, even as her body craved the nourishment. "Start slow," Cole said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "You don't have to eat much, just something to keep your strength up." She managed half a piece of cornbread and a few bites of beans before her stomach called it quits. The men didn't comment on her meager consumption, just continued their conversation about fence repairs and a mountain lion that had been spotted near the north pasture. Normal ranch talk. The kind of thing Victoria remembered from before, when her father had still been alive and they'd had neighbors with horses and cattle. After supper, Jake and Samuel excused themselves to the bunkhouse, leaving Victoria and Cole alone in the main room. He poured coffee for them both, and they sat in the chairs before the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. "First few days are going to be rough," Cole said without preamble. "Your body's going to fight you every step of the way, but if you can get through the worst of it, it gets easier." "You sound like you know from experience," Victoria observed, cradling the warm mug between her palms. "Not personal experience, but I watched my brother go through it. The shakes, the sickness, the craving that never quite goes away. He tried to quit 3 times before he gave up entirely." Cole stared into the fire, his expression distant. "I won't let that happen to you. Whatever you need to get through this, I'll provide it. Even if it means you hate me for a while." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, a strange warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee or the fire. "Why do you care so much? You just met me this morning." Cole turned to look at her, and in the firelight, his eyes were the color of storm clouds. "Maybe I believe everyone deserves a second chance, or maybe I'm just stubborn enough to think I can make a difference. Does it matter?" "I suppose not," Victoria admitted. "I just don't want you to be disappointed when I fail." "Then don't fail," Cole said simply. "Choose not to fail. Every day, every hour, every minute if you have to. Just keep choosing." It sounded so easy when he said it like that, as if willpower alone could overcome years of drowning in alcohol. But Victoria found herself nodding anyway, wanting to believe him even if she wasn't sure she could. That night, she lay awake in her room, sweating and shaking as her body screamed for the whiskey it was used to. The walls seemed to close in on her, and more than once she got up intending to run, to flee back to town and the blessed numbness of a bottle. But each time, she thought of Cole's steady gray eyes and the faith he'd placed in her for no good reason, and she forced herself back into bed. "Just keep choosing," he'd said. So she chose to stay, chose to endure, chose to try, even when every cell in her body was rebelling against the decision. By morning, she felt like she'd been trampled by horses. Her head throbbed, her muscles ached, and her stomach roiled with nausea. But she dragged herself out of bed and into the main room, where Cole was already up making coffee. He took one look at her and nodded, as if he'd expected exactly what he saw. "Sit down before you fall down. I'll bring you some water and toast." "I'm supposed to be working," Victoria protested weakly. "Earning my keep." "You are working. You're fighting the hardest battle there is." Cole pressed a glass of water into her hands. "Drink, small sips. The toast will help settle your stomach." She did as he instructed, too miserable to argue. The water helped a little, the toast even more. Cole sat across from her, sipping his own coffee, a silent and steady presence. "How long does this last?" she asked finally, her voice hoarse. "The worst of it? A few days, maybe a week. But the craving can last a lot longer." He set down his mug, his expression serious. "I need you to promise me something, Victoria. If it gets too bad, if you feel like you can't handle it, you come to me. You don't run, you don't hide, you don't try to handle it alone. You come find me, and we'll get through it together. Can you promise me that?" The intensity of his gaze made her chest tight. "I promise," she whispered, and meant it. The days that followed were a special kind of hell. Victoria's body, deprived of the alcohol it had come to depend on, staged a full rebellion. She shook, she sweated, she vomited until there was nothing left to bring up. Her sleep was fractured and filled with nightmares, and she woke crying more than once, mourning losses she'd tried so hard to forget. But through it all, Cole was there. He brought her water and broth when she could keep nothing else down. He sat with her through the worst of the shakes, his presence a quiet comfort. He didn't judge, didn't lecture, didn't make her feel weak for struggling. He just stayed, solid and unshakable, an anchor in the storm. On the fourth day, Victoria woke feeling marginally more human. The shaking had lessened, and while she still felt weak and wrung out, the worst seemed to have passed. She managed to get dressed in one of her old work dresses and emerged from her room to find Cole cooking breakfast. "Look who's vertical," he said with a smile that made his whole face light up. "Think you can handle some eggs?" "I can try," Victoria said, settling into her now familiar chair at the table. "Cole, I never properly thanked you for everything, for not giving up on me when you had every reason to." "Nothing to thank me for," Cole replied, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon in front of her. "This is all you, Victoria. You're the one doing the hard work. I'm just here to make sure you don't have to do it alone." She ate slowly, marveling at the fact that the food actually tasted good, that her stomach wasn't immediately rejecting it. Through the window, she could see the sun rising over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful in a way she hadn't noticed in years, beauty that wasn't filtered through an alcoholic haze. "I want to help today," she announced, surprising herself with the declaration. "Real help, not just sitting around feeling sorry for myself. Put me to work." Cole studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. The garden needs weeding and the chickens need tending. Nothing too strenuous, but it'll keep you busy. And Victoria, staying busy is key, idle hands and all that." She spent the morning in the garden, pulling weeds under the warm New Mexico sun. It was harder work than she'd anticipated, her weakened body protesting every movement. But there was something deeply satisfying about it, about coaxing order from chaos, about seeing the neat rows of vegetables emerge from beneath the tangle of unwanted plants. Cole checked on her periodically, bringing water and words of encouragement. Once, when she paused to wipe sweat from her forehead, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something soft and wondering, as if he was seeing something unexpected. "What?" she asked, self-conscious about her disheveled appearance. "Nothing," he said, but he was almost smiling. "Just thinking you look more alive than you did a week ago. Color's coming back to your cheeks." Victoria touched her face self-consciously. "I probably look like a mess." "You look like someone who's fighting," Cole corrected. "That's never a mess. That's courage." The compliment, simple as it was, warmed her more than the sun. She turned back to her weeding to hide the flush she felt creeping up her neck. It had been so long since anyone had said anything kind to her, since anyone had looked at her with anything other than pity or disgust. Cole's respect, hard-earned though it was, felt precious. That evening, Jake and Samuel returned from their work and seemed pleased to see Victoria up and moving. Over dinner, they regaled her with stories of ranch life, of ornery cattle, and narrow escapes from rattlesnakes. Their easy camaraderie was infectious, and Victoria found herself laughing for the first time in she couldn't remember how long. "It's good to hear that sound," Cole said quietly after the others had left for the bunkhouse. "Your laugh. I was starting to wonder if you remembered how." "I'd forgotten," Victoria admitted, helping him clear the dishes. "I'd forgotten a lot of things. How to laugh, how to feel the sun without resenting it, how to want to wake up in the morning. It's strange, remembering." "Strange good or strange bad?" Cole asked, pumping water into the basin for washing. Victoria considered as she dried the clean plates. "Strange good, I think. Scary, but good, like learning to walk again after being bedridden for too long." "That's exactly what it is," Cole said, his voice warm with approval. "You're relearning how to live. It takes time, and it takes practice, but you're doing it. Every day you're doing it." They worked in companionable silence, and Victoria found herself hyper-aware of his proximity in the small kitchen area. He was tall enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes, and there was a solidness to him that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in years. When their hands brushed reaching for the same pot, she felt a jolt that had nothing to do with the lingering effects of alcohol withdrawal. She pulled back quickly, confused by her own reaction. It was too soon to feel anything like that, too soon to even think about seeing Cole as anything other than her savior and employer. She was still broken, still fighting to remember who she was. She had no business thinking about the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, or the gentle strength in his hands. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when she thought of him. Couldn't deny that something was shifting, that Cole Wyatt was becoming more than just the man who'd pulled her from the gutter. He was becoming important, and that terrified her almost as much as sobriety did. The weeks passed in a rhythm that Victoria gradually grew accustomed to. She rose with the sun, helped Cole with breakfast, tended the garden and the chickens, prepared the midday meal, and spent her afternoons doing mending or helping with whatever other tasks needed doing. It was simple work, honest work, and she found a satisfaction in it that she'd never expected. The cravings for alcohol persisted, but they grew more manageable as time passed. There were still nights when she woke with her body screaming for whiskey, still moments when the urge to ride into town and lose herself in a bottle was nearly overwhelming. But she kept her promise to Cole, and whenever it got too bad, she sought him out. He never made her feel weak for it. Sometimes they'd sit on the porch and he'd talk about nothing important until the craving passed. Other times they'd take a walk in the cool evening air, and the movement would ease the restlessness in her bones. Once, when it was particularly bad, he'd saddled horses and they'd ridden out to a bluff overlooking the valley. And he'd told her about his childhood in Texas until dawn painted the sky and the moment had passed. "You don't have to do this," she told him that morning as they rode back to the ranch. "You've already done so much. You don't have to keep being my keeper." Cole looked at her, his face serious in the early light. "What if I want to? What if helping you isn't a burden, but a choice I make gladly?" Victoria didn't know how to respond to that, so she said nothing. But the words stayed with her, turning over and over in her mind like smooth stones in a river. It was late September, a month after she'd come to the ranch, when Victoria realized she was falling in love with Cole Wyatt. The revelation came quietly, not in a moment of high drama, but in the simple observation of him mending a fence, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms, his face focused on the task at hand. She'd brought him water, and when he looked up and smiled at her, something in her chest had shifted and settled, like a key turning in a lock. "Oh no," she thought. "This is the last thing I need." But her heart, newly awakened to feeling after years of numbness, didn't care about logic or timing. It had decided, and there was no arguing with it. The trouble was, she had no idea how Cole felt about her. He was unfailingly kind, endlessly patient, always there when she needed him. But was that affection, or simply the care of a good man for someone he'd taken responsibility for? She didn't know, and she was terrified to find out. Worse, she didn't feel worthy of him. She was a drunk, or at least a recovering one. She'd wasted 3 years of her life in a bottle. What could she possibly offer someone like Cole, who was strong and stable, and everything she was trying to become? So, she kept her feelings locked away, hidden beneath carefully maintained normalcy. She cooked his meals and mended his clothes and worked his garden, and tried not to think about what it would feel like to have the right to touch him, to be held by him, to be loved by him. But Cole, it seemed, was more observant than she'd given him credit for. It was early October when he brought it up, catching her alone in the kitchen after supper. Jake and Samuel had already retreated to the bunkhouse, and Victoria was elbow-deep in dishwater when Cole said, "You've been avoiding me." Victoria's hands stilled in the water. "I haven't. I see you every day." "That's not the same thing, and you know it." Cole leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "You won't meet my eyes anymore. You go quiet when I come into a room. You practically run away if we're alone for too long. Did I do something to make you uncomfortable?" "No," Victoria said quickly, too quickly. "No, you've been nothing but kind. It's not you, it's complicated." "Complicated how?" Cole pressed, and there was something in his voice that made her stomach flip. "Talk to me, Victoria. I thought we'd gotten past the point where you had to hide from me." She pulled her hands from the dishwater and dried them on her apron, buying time, trying to figure out what to say. The truth would only make things awkward. A lie would be easier, safer. But hadn't she learned by now that safe wasn't always better? "I'm afraid," she finally admitted, still not looking at him. "I'm afraid of what I'm feeling, and I'm afraid of what it means, and I'm afraid that I'm going to ruin everything, like I ruin everything else." There was a long moment of silence, and then Cole's hand was under her chin, gently turning her face toward his. His gray eyes were intense, searching hers with an expression that made her breath catch. "What are you feeling?" he asked softly. Victoria's heart was hammering so hard, she was sure he could hear it. This was it, the moment of truth. She could deflect, could laugh it off, could protect herself by keeping her walls up. Or she could be brave, could risk the rejection that would surely come when he realized she was falling for him. "I'm feeling things I shouldn't," she whispered. "Things that aren't appropriate given that you saved my life and gave me a job, and I'm still barely holding myself together most days." "Victoria," Cole said, and his thumb brushed across her cheek in a gesture so tender it made her ache. "What if I told you I've been feeling those same inappropriate things? What if I told you that watching you fight your way back to yourself has been the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed? What if I told you that somewhere along the way, helping you stopped being about my brother and started being about you?" She stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "You can't mean that. I'm a mess. I'm broken." "You're not broken," Cole corrected firmly. "You're healing. There's a difference. And yes, you've got scars, but who doesn't? At least yours are honest. At least you're fighting instead of pretending everything's fine." Tears spilled down Victoria's cheeks before she could stop them. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve any of this." "That's not your decision to make," Cole said, pulling her into his arms. She went stiffly at first, then melted against his chest, letting herself be held for the first time in longer than she could remember. He was warm and solid and real, and she felt safe in a way that had nothing to do with protection from external threats and everything to do with being seen, truly seen, and accepted anyway. "I'm scared," she mumbled against his shirt. "I'm so scared of messing this up." "Then we'll be scared together," Cole murmured into her hair. "And we'll take it slow, and we'll figure it out as we go. There's no rush, Victoria. We've got time." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and the tenderness in his expression nearly undid her. "I've never done this sober," she admitted, her voice breaking on the words. "I've never let myself feel anything sober. Everything before was just whiskey and bad judgment and regret. I don't even know how to do this properly." Cole smiled, and it was the sweetest thing she'd ever seen. "Then we'll learn together. And Victoria, when we get to the point where I kiss you, I want you to be completely sober. I want you to remember every second of it. I want it to be real, with nothing between us but choice and feeling. Can you wait for that? Can you be patient while we do this right?" Victoria nodded, her throat too tight for words. The fact that he understood, that he wanted her first real kiss to be something she'd remember and treasure, made her love him even more. This man who'd pulled her from the gutter saw something in her worth waiting for. Worth doing right. "I can wait," she managed. "I can be patient." "Good," Cole said, pressing a kiss to her forehead that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. "Because you're worth waiting for. You're worth doing right." They stood there in the kitchen for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Victoria felt the last piece of her broken heart slot back into place. She wasn't healed, not completely. She still had a long road ahead of her, but for the first time in years, she believed she could walk it, especially if Cole was walking beside her. The next weeks were a strange and wonderful dance as Victoria and Cole navigated this new dimension of their relationship. Nothing dramatic changed on the surface. She still did her work. He still ran the ranch, and to Jake and Samuel, nothing seemed different, but everything was different. There were looks that lasted a heartbeat too long, casual touches that sent electricity singing through her veins, conversations that stretched late into the evening as they learned the landscapes of each other's minds and hearts. Cole told her about growing up in Texas, about the brother he'd lost and the parents who'd died when he was young. He told her about learning to be a cowboy, about the years he'd spent on cattle drives seeing the country, about the dream he'd had of owning his own place and finally making it real. Victoria told him about her childhood in Pinos Altos, about her father who'd been stern but loving, about her mother who'd been the gentlest soul she'd ever known. She told him about the sewing business her mother had run, about the little house they'd lived in that had been sold for debts after her mother died. She told him about the long spiral into alcohol, the memories that were more gaps than substance, the shame that had become her constant companion. "I kissed men when I was drunk," she confessed one night when they were sitting on the porch watching the stars. I don't even remember most of them, just vague impressions, fragmented moments that made me feel sick the next day. That's not how it's supposed to be, is it? Kissing should mean something. Cole's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining. It should mean everything, he agreed. It should be a conversation without words, a promise made with lips and breath. When I kiss you, Victoria, and I will kiss you, it's going to mean something. It's going to mean everything. The promise in his words made her shiver despite the warm October night. How will we know when the time is right? We'll know, Cole said with quiet certainty. Trust me, we'll know. The time came on a Thursday in late October, 3 months after Victoria had stumbled out of the Silver Spur saloon and into Cole's life. The day had been unremarkable, filled with the usual round of chores and tasks. But as evening fell and they found themselves alone on the porch after supper, something felt different. The air seemed charged, expectant, as if the world was holding its breath. 3 months sober today, Victoria said softly, more to herself than to Cole. 90 days without a drink. I never thought I'd make it this far. Cole turned to her, and the look on his face made her heart skip. I knew you would. I've known since that first day that you were stronger than you believed. I'm only strong because of you, Victoria replied. Because you wouldn't let me quit. Because you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. No, Cole said, shifting closer to her on the porch swing. You're strong because that's who you are, who you've always been beneath the fear and the grief. I just gave you a safe place to remember it. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, grateful tears. She looked at Cole, at this man who'd saved her in every way a person could be saved, and felt her love for him swell until it seemed too large for her body to contain. Cole, she whispered, I'm completely sober. I'm clear-headed and certain, and I'm telling you right now that I love you. I love you so much it scares me, but I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting fear run my life. Cole's eyes widened, then softened into something that looked like wonder. Victoria Lang, I have been waiting to hear you say those words. I love you too. I think I've loved you since the day you chose to stay, to fight, to try. I've loved watching you bloom back into life. I've loved every stubborn, courageous moment of you. Then kiss me, Victoria breathed. Please, Cole, kiss me and make it real. Make it perfect. Make it everything a first kiss should be. Cole cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. He looked at her like she was precious, like she was everything he'd ever wanted. And then, with infinite gentleness, he lowered his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question asked and answered. Victoria's eyes fluttered closed as she savored the sensation, the warmth of his mouth on hers, the tender pressure that spoke of restraint and desire in equal measure. This was nothing like the fumbling, drunken kisses of her past. This was deliberate and meaningful and absolutely perfect. When Cole deepened the kiss, she responded without hesitation, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to him. The world fell away until there was nothing but this, nothing but the connection between them, the promise being made with every movement of their lips. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria was crying in earnest. That was perfect, she said through her tears. That was everything. Thank you for waiting, for making it special, for giving me this. Cole kissed away her tears, his own eyes suspiciously bright. Thank you for being brave enough to let me love you. Thank you for fighting your way back. Thank you for being here. They held each other on the porch swing as the stars wheeled overhead, and Victoria felt peace settle over her like a blanket. This was what she'd been missing all those years in the bottom of a bottle. This connection, this love, this feeling of being whole and seen and valued. She hadn't known it could feel like this, clean and bright and real. What happens now? She asked eventually, her head resting on Cole's shoulder. Now we keep going, Cole said simply. We keep building, keep growing. We see where this takes us. But, Victoria, I need you to know something. This isn't just a passing thing for me. I'm in this for the long haul. If you'll have me, I want to build a life with you. A real life, a good life. Victoria pulled back to look at him, searching his face for any hint of doubt or hesitation. She found none, only steady certainty in a love that mirrored her own. I'll have you, she said, and the words felt like a vow. I'll build that life with you. But Cole, I need to be honest. I'm always going to be in recovery. The craving for alcohol might never completely go away. I might have hard days, might struggle. Are you sure you want to sign up for that? I've never been more sure of anything, Cole replied without hesitation. We'll handle the hard days together, just like we've been doing. You don't have to carry that burden alone anymore. That's what loving someone means. You share the weight. It was exactly the right thing to say, the perfect answer to the fear that had been lurking in the back of Victoria's mind. She kissed him again, pouring all her gratitude and love into the gesture, trying to convey without words what he meant to her. They stayed on the porch long into the night, talking and kissing and planning a future that had seemed impossible just 3 months ago. And when Victoria finally retired to her room, she lay in bed with a smile on her face, feeling more alive and hopeful than she could remember feeling in her entire adult life. The next morning at breakfast, Jake took one look at them and grinned. "About time," he said cheerfully. "Samuel and I have been taking bets on when you two would finally figure it out." Victoria blushed crimson, but Cole just laughed. "That obvious, were we?" "As a punch to the face," Samuel agreed, speaking around a mouthful of eggs. "You've been mooning over each other for weeks. Glad you finally did something about it." Victoria shook her head, amused despite her embarrassment. It was strange being happy like this. Strange and wonderful and a little terrifying. But she was learning to embrace those feelings instead of running from them, to trust that good things could be real and lasting. As fall deepened into winter, Victoria and Cole's relationship deepened with it. They were circumspect in front of the ranch hands, but when they were alone, they explored this new territory between them with joy and wonder. Every kiss was still a revelation to Victoria, still a stark reminder of the difference between drunken oblivion and clear-headed choice. Cole continued to be patient with her, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, always checking in to make sure she was comfortable. It made her love him even more, this respect for her boundaries, this understanding that she needed to rebuild herself before she could fully give herself to another person. By December, Victoria had been sober for 5 months, and the change in her was remarkable. She'd gained weight, filling out the gaunt hollows in her face and body. Her skin glowed with health, her eyes were bright and clear. She smiled easily and laughed often, and when she caught her reflection in the mirror, she sometimes barely recognized the woman looking back at her. "You're beautiful," Cole told her one cold evening, when they were wrapped in blankets on the porch, watching snow fall on the distant mountains. "I thought so that first day, beneath all the mess and the hurt. But now, seeing you like this, happy and healthy and wholly yourself, you take my breath away." Victoria turned in his arms to kiss him, slow and deep. "I want to be yours," she murmured against his lips. "Fully, completely. I'm ready, Cole. I'm ready to take that step with you." Cole pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. "Are you sure? There's no rush, Victoria. I can wait as long as you need." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, and I trust you, and I want to share everything with you. My body, my heart, my future. All of it." Something fierce and tender flashed in Cole's eyes. "Then marry me," he said, the words tumbling out as if he couldn't hold them back any longer. "I was going to wait, was going to do this proper with a ring and a planned speech, but I can't. I can't wait another moment to ask you to be my wife. Marry me, Victoria. Build this life with me officially. Let me love you for the rest of our days." Victoria's breath caught in her throat, happy tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I'll marry you, Cole Wyatt. I'll be your wife and your partner and your everything." Cole kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools, giddy with happiness and plans for the future. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Pinos Altos, with Jake and Samuel as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Victoria wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved and altered to fit, and Cole wore his best suit. Martha from the restaurant cried happy tears, and even the minister seemed moved by the obvious devotion between the couple. "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked Cole. "I do," Cole said, his voice ringing clear and certain, "with everything I am and everything I have." "And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Victoria looked at Cole, at the man who'd saved her life and taught her to live again, and felt her heart overflow. "I do," she said, "with all my heart, now and forever. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed her in front of everyone, and Victoria felt like she was flying. This was real. This was her life. She was married to the most wonderful man in the world, and she was sober, and she was happy, and it was all almost too much to believe. The celebration afterward was modest but joyful, with food and music and dancing. Victoria danced with her new husband, with Jake and Samuel, even with some of the townspeople who'd written her off as a lost cause 3 months ago. She saw the surprise in their eyes, the grudging respect for how far she'd come. It felt like vindication, like proof that she wasn't that broken girl anymore. But more than that, it felt like coming home, like finally finding the place and the person she was meant to be with. That night, in the room they now shared, Cole made love to his wife with a tenderness that brought tears to Victoria's eyes. It was nothing like the fumbling, forgettable encounters of her drinking days. This was sacred, meaningful, a physical expression of the love they had built together. Every touch was reverent, every kiss a promise. And when it was over, and they lay tangled together in the aftermath, Victoria felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for believing I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Cole murmured, his arms tightening around her. "I just provided the space for you to do it. And Victoria, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. Loving you, watching you heal, being part of your journey back to yourself has been the greatest privilege of my life." They drifted off to sleep, wrapped in each other, safe and warm and deeply, truly happy. The months that followed were the best of Victoria's life. She threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning everything she could about the business and the land. She proved to have a good head for numbers, taking over the ranch's books and finding ways to economize and increase profits. Cole valued her input, treating her as a true partner rather than just a helpmate. In the spring, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a little trepidation. They'd been married only a few months, and while they'd talked about children, neither had expected it to happen so quickly. "Are you happy about this?" Cole asked, his hand resting on her still flat belly. "Truly happy?" "I'm terrified," Victoria admitted. "But yes, I'm happy. I'm going to be a mother. We're going to have a baby. How could I not be happy?" "You'll be a wonderful mother," Cole said with conviction. "Our child is lucky to have you." Victoria wasn't sure she believed that, but she was determined to prove worthy of Cole's faith. She'd come so far from the woman who'd stumbled out of the saloon 10 months ago. She could do this. She could be a good mother. The pregnancy was not easy. Victoria suffered from terrible morning sickness that lasted well into her second trimester. There were days when she could barely keep anything down, when the smell of cooking meat sent her running for the wash basin. Cole was patient and supportive, taking over more of the household duties and making sure she rested. "I'm supposed to be taking care of you," Victoria protested one day when Cole brought her dry toast and weak tea in bed. "Marriage is a partnership," Cole replied. "We take care of each other. Right now, you're doing the hard work of growing our child. The least I can do is make you some toast." As her belly swelled through the summer, Victoria found herself thinking often about her mother, how she wished her mother could be here to see this, to meet her grandchild. She would have loved Cole, would have been so proud of Victoria for fighting her way back from the brink. "I hope I can be half the mother mine was," Victoria confided to Cole one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "She was so patient, so loving. I don't know if I have that in me." "You have more than you know," Cole assured her. "You fought your way out of addiction. You rebuilt your entire life. If you can do that, you can do anything, including raising a child with all the love and patience they deserve." The baby came in early November, on a clear, cold day with the mountains white with the season's first heavy snow. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Victoria was certain she couldn't continue. But Cole was there throughout, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement, even when she cursed him for getting her into this situation. When the midwife finally placed a squalling, red-faced baby in Victoria's arms, all the pain was forgotten in an instant. She looked down at the tiny face, the miniature fingers curled into fists, and felt a love so fierce and immediate it stole her breath. "It's a boy," the midwife announced. "A healthy, strong boy." Cole leaned over to look at his son, and Victoria saw tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," Cole breathed. "Victoria, look what we made. Look at him." They named him Thomas, after Cole's brother, and Charles, after Victoria's father. Thomas Charles Wyatt, born November 7th, 1880, and from the moment he entered the world, he had both his parents wrapped around his tiny fingers. The first months of Thomas's life were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Victoria had never been so tired, never felt so overwhelmed, but she also had never felt so purposeful. This was her son, her baby, and every sleepless night and every moment of worry was worth it to see him grow and thrive. Cole was a devoted father, taking over nighttime duties when he could, walking the floors with a crying Thomas so Victoria could sleep. They worked together as a team, just as they did in everything else, and their bond deepened with every shared moment of exhaustion and joy. One night, when Thomas was 3 months old and finally sleeping through most nights, Victoria found herself unable to sleep. She got up and wandered to the kitchen, intending to make some tea. She found Cole already there, standing at the window and looking out at the starlit darkness. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. "Just thinking," Cole replied, slipping an arm around her waist. "About how much has changed in a year and a half, how different our lives are now." Victoria leaned into him, thinking about the woman she'd been 18 months ago, drunk, broken, hopeless. She'd thought her life was over, that she had nothing left to live for. And then Cole had appeared, offering her a chance she didn't think she deserved. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Taking me on? You could have had an easier life without me." Cole turned to face her fully, his expression fierce. "Don't even think that. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria. You and Thomas. This life we're building together is everything I ever wanted, and more than I dared to dream of. I wouldn't change a single thing." "Not even the part where I was a falling down drunk?" Victoria asked, trying to make light of it, but unable to keep the old shame from creeping into her voice. "Not even that," Cole said seriously. "Because that struggle, that fight, that's what made you who you are now. It gave you compassion and strength and a deep understanding of what it means to overcome. Our son is going to have a mother who knows that life can be hard, but that it's always worth fighting for. What could be more valuable than that?" Victoria felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were healing tears, releasing the last vestiges of shame she'd been carrying. Cole was right. Her past didn't define her. Her choices now, the person she'd become, that's what mattered. "I love you," she said simply. "I love this life we've built. I love our son. I love the woman I am when I'm with you. Thank you for all of it." Cole kissed her then, soft and sweet, a reaffirmation of everything they'd promised each other. When they returned to bed, Victoria slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. The years that followed were full of hard work, laughter, and love. The ranch prospered under their joint management, growing from a modest operation into a respected spread. Jake eventually moved on to start his own place, but Samuel stayed, becoming like family and an indispensable part of their lives. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who was equally comfortable in the barn with the horses, as he was sitting at the kitchen table while Victoria taught him to read. 2 years after Thomas was born, Victoria delivered a daughter they named Lily Catherine, with her mother's green eyes and her father's steady temperament. And 3 years after that came another boy, James, who was as wild and mischievous as Thomas had been serious. The house that had once held just Cole and his hired hands now rang with the sounds of children's laughter, crying babies, and the organized chaos of family life. Victoria thrived in it, though she sometimes marveled at the woman she'd become. A mother, a wife, a rancher, a woman who could barely remember the last time she'd thought about a drink, let alone craved one. There were still hard days, still moments when the old demons whispered in her ear. The anniversary of her mother's death always hit her hard, and there were times when stress or exhaustion made the idea of numbing the world with alcohol tempting. But she'd built a support system now. She had Cole, who understood without judgment. She had her children, who needed her present and sober. She had a life worth living, and she wasn't about to throw that away. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole surprised her with a trip to Santa Fe, their first time away from the ranch and children since Thomas had been born. Samuel agreed to stay with the kids, and Jake and his new wife promised to check in daily. Victoria was nervous about leaving, but Cole insisted. "We need this," he said. "Time for just us, to remember who we are outside of being parents and ranchers. We've earned it." Santa Fe was beautiful and exciting and overwhelming after so many years of ranch life. They stayed in a hotel, ate in restaurants, shopped in stores that carried goods from back east in Mexico. And at night, in their hotel room, they rediscovered each other with the passion and intensity of newlyweds. On their last evening, they sat on the hotel balcony watching the sun set over the city, sipping coffee and holding hands. "Do you remember that first kiss?" Victoria asked, smiling at the memory. "How you made sure I was completely sober, how you wanted it to be perfect." "Best decision I ever made," Cole replied. "Well, second best. The first was deciding to help you that day in Pinos Altos." Victoria turned to look at her husband, at the man who'd grown even more handsome with age, a few threads of silver now visible in his dark hair. "You know what I was thinking earlier? I was thinking that I've never been kissed drunk since that day. Every kiss we've shared has been sober and real and perfect. You gave me that, Cole. You gave me a life where I don't need alcohol to feel complete." Cole's eyes softened, and he pulled her close. "You gave yourself that life, Victoria. I was just lucky enough to be there when you decided you were worth saving. And every day since then, watching you be a mother, a wife, a partner, has been an honor. I fall more in love with you with every passing year." Victoria kissed him then, there on the balcony with the Santa Fe sunset painting everything gold and rose. It was sober and sweet and absolutely perfect, just like that first kiss 10 years ago, just like every kiss they had shared since. When they returned to the ranch, their children mobbed them with hugs and stories of everything that had happened while they were gone. Thomas, now 9, had helped Samuel with all the major chores. Lily, 7, had baked a cake that was lopsided, but made with love. And James, 4, had made them drawings of the family that Victoria would treasure forever. That night, after the children were in bed, Victoria and Cole sat on their porch as they had so many times before. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had looked down on a broken woman and a compassionate cowboy 10 years ago. "We did good," Cole said, gesturing at the house, the ranch, the life they had built. "We did," Victoria agreed. "Better than good. We did great." And as she sat there beside the man who'd saved her life by teaching her to save herself, Victoria felt a contentment so deep and true that it brought tears to her eyes. She'd thought she was a lost cause, thought she was beyond redemption, but Cole had seen something in her worth believing in, and that belief had given her the courage to believe in herself. Her first sober kiss had been perfect, but even more perfect was the life that had followed, every kiss after that building on the foundation they'd created together, a life of sobriety, love, family, and purpose, a life she'd never imagined possible in her darkest days. Victoria had never been kissed sober before Cole, but he'd made sure her first real kiss was perfect, and in doing so, he'd given her the perfect life. As the years continued to pass, Victoria sometimes reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place of peace and fulfillment. She'd gone from the depths of alcoholism to become a respected member of the community, a loving mother, and a capable businesswoman. The ranch continued to thrive, and by the time Thomas was 15, he was working alongside his father as a true partner in the operation. Victoria had found purpose in helping others who struggled with addiction. Word had spread about her story, and occasionally people would come to the ranch seeking her counsel. She never turned anyone away, always making time to share her experience and offer hope. Some took her advice and found their own path to sobriety. Others weren't ready. She understood that too, remembered how she'd needed to hit rock bottom before she could climb back up. "You're making a difference," Cole told her after she'd spent an afternoon talking with a young woman from a neighboring ranch who'd been struggling with laudanum. "You're giving them what I tried to give you. Hope the change is possible." "I'm giving them what you gave me," Victoria corrected. "The belief that they're worth saving, that their story doesn't have to end in tragedy. You taught me that, Cole. Everything good in my life stems from that lesson." Cole pulled her into his arms, still as strong and comforting as they'd been that first day. "We taught each other. That's what love is. Growing together, learning together, becoming better together than we ever could have been apart." On a warm evening in late spring, when Victoria was 42 years old and had been sober for 20 years, the whole family gathered for supper. Thomas had recently married a sweet girl named Emma from a ranch to the east, and they were expecting their first child. Lily had just returned from Teachers College in Denver and would be starting at the Pinos Altos School in the fall. James, at 18, was torn between helping run the ranch and joining the army, a decision that gave Victoria anxious nights. As Victoria looked around the table at her family, at the faces she loved more than life itself, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. 20 years ago, she'd been dying slowly in a bottle, convinced her life was over. And now, look at what she had. A husband who still made her heart race, children who were becoming remarkable adults in their own right, and the promise of grandchildren to spoil. After supper, Cole took her hand and led her out to the porch, their sacred space where so many important moments had happened. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Victoria opened it to find a delicate silver necklace with a pendant in the shape of a mountain. "Cole, it's beautiful." "Look at the inscription," he urged. She tilted the pendant to catch the lamplight and read the words engraved there. 20 years of choosing, 20 years of loving, today and always. The tears came then, happy tears that she didn't try to stop. "You remembered." "Of course I remembered," Cole said, fastening the necklace around her throat. 20 years ago today, you stumbled out of that saloon and into my life. 20 years ago, you made the choice that changed everything. That's worth celebrating." Victoria touched the pendant, feeling the weight of it against her chest. 20 years. 2 decades of sobriety, of choosing life over numbness, of building something beautiful from the ruins of what she'd been. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for seeing me, for believing in me, for loving me even when I couldn't love myself." "Always," Cole replied, kissing her softly. "Every day, every moment, always." As they stood together on the porch watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Victoria thought about that first perfect kiss. The one Cole had made sure she was sober for. The one that had been the beginning of everything. She'd been so broken then, so certain she was beyond hope. But Cole Wyatt had proven her wrong. He'd shown her that it was never too late to change, never too late to choose a different path. And in doing so, he'd given her not just that one perfect kiss, but a lifetime of them. Every kiss sober, every kiss real, every kiss a reaffirmation of the life they'd built together. She'd never been kissed sober before Cole, but he'd made sure her first real kiss was perfect. And then he'd spent the next 20 years making sure every kiss after that was just as perfect. And as Victoria stood there in her husband's arms, surrounded by the life they'd created together, she knew that was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. Not just sobriety, not just love, but the chance to become the woman she was always meant to be. The story of Victoria Lang and Cole Wyatt wasn't about a cowboy saving a broken woman. It was about 2 people choosing each other, choosing love, choosing to build something beautiful together, despite the obstacles in their path. It was about redemption and second chances and the transformative power of believing that everyone deserves to be seen and valued. And it was about that first perfect kiss, sober and sweet and absolutely real, that had started it all. Years later, when Victoria was gray-haired and surrounded by grandchildren, she would tell them the story of how she met their grandfather. She never shied away from the truth of her alcoholism, believing that honesty was the best legacy she could leave. She wanted them to know that people could change, that mistakes didn't have to define you, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. And she would tell them about that first kiss, the one their grandfather had made sure was perfect, the one that had been the beginning of the best love story she could have ever imagined. "Your grandfather saved my life," she would tell them, "by teaching me how to save myself, and then he loved me through every day after that, making sure I never forgot I was worth saving." It was the truth, pure and simple. Cole Wyatt had been her savior, her partner, her great love. And that first perfect sober kiss had been the beginning of a lifetime of perfection, built one choice, one day, one kiss at a time. As Victoria entered her later years, the ranch passed primarily into Thomas's capable hands, though she and Cole remained active in advisory roles. They had built something lasting, something that would endure beyond their years. The Wyatt Ranch was known throughout New Mexico, not just for the quality of its cattle and horses, but for the integrity of the people who ran it. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered for a massive celebration. Thomas and Emma had 5 children of their own now, all working on various aspects of the expanded ranch. Lily had married a fellow teacher and had 3 children who showed signs of inheriting their mother's love of learning. James had served in the Army for 6 years before returning home to help run the ranch, eventually marrying and starting a family of his own. The gathering was joyous, with 3 generations of Wyatts and their extended families filling the ranch house and spilling out onto the grounds. There was music and dancing, and enough food to feed twice their number. But the highlight of the evening came when Cole stood to make a toast. 50 years ago, he began, his voice still strong despite his 75 years. I made the best decision of my life. I saw a woman who needed help, and instead of walking away like so many others had, I offered my hand. What I didn't know then was that in saving her, she would save me right back. He turned to Victoria, his eyes still as clear and gray as they'd been that first day. Victoria, you've been my partner, my best friend, my great love for half a century. You've given me children and grandchildren and a life richer than I ever dreamed possible. You've shown me what courage looks like, what true strength means. You've never stopped fighting, never stopped choosing us, choosing this life. And I am grateful for every single day I've been blessed to spend by your side. Victoria rose to stand beside him, tears streaming down her weathered face. And I'm grateful to you, Cole Wyatt, for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You made sure my first sober kiss was perfect, and then you spent 50 years making sure every day after that was perfect too. I love you beyond words, beyond measure, beyond anything I could ever express. They kissed then, to the applause and cheers of their family, and it was just as perfect as that first kiss had been 50 years ago, sober and real and full of love. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house had quieted, Victoria and Cole sat on their porch one last time. They were old now, their bodies showing the wear of 7 decades of life. But their love was as strong as ever, tempered and strengthened by 50 years of choosing each other every single day. Do you have any regrets? Victoria asked, a question she'd never dared voice before. Cole was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. Not a single one. Every choice I made led me here, to this moment, with you. How could I regret anything that brought me such joy? Even the hard parts, Victoria pressed. The nights I struggled with cravings, the times I was difficult, the moments I was sure I'd fail. Especially those parts, Cole said firmly. Because those were the moments that proved how strong you are, how committed you were to building this life. The hard parts made the good parts even sweeter. Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. I never thought I'd make it to 72. When I was drinking myself to death at 22, I figured I'd be lucky to see 30. And here I am, surrounded by more blessings than I can count, married to the best man I've ever known. Here we both are, Cole agreed, and I wouldn't trade a single moment of it. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars appeared, the same stars that had witnessed their entire love story. Victoria thought about that girl she'd been, so broken and hopeless. She thought about the man who'd refused to let her give up. She thought about every choice that had led to this moment, every kiss, every laugh, every tear. And she thought about that first perfect kiss, sober and sweet, that had changed the trajectory of her entire life. Cole, she said softly. Yes, love? Thank you for making sure my first real kiss was perfect. Thank you for giving me a lifetime of perfect kisses. Thank you for everything. Cole turned to her, his eyes soft with love. The pleasure, Victoria Wyatt, has been entirely mine. He kissed her then, there on the porch where so many kisses had come before. And even after 50 years, it was still perfect, still sober, still real, still everything a kiss should be. Because Victoria had never been kissed sober before Cole Wyatt made sure her first real one was perfect. And in doing so, he'd given her not just a kiss, but a life. A beautiful, messy, joy-filled life full of love and purpose and second chances. It was the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. And as she sat there in the arms of the man who'd saved her by teaching her to save herself, Victoria knew that every struggle, every hard day, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because love, real love, the kind that's chosen consciously and cultivated carefully, was always worth fighting for. And her love story with Cole Wyatt was proof that it was never too late to change, never too late to choose differently, never too late to find the life you were always meant to live. Their story was one of redemption and grace, of seeing the potential in broken things and choosing to help them heal. It was about the transformative power of love, given freely and without condition. And it started with a cowboy who refused to walk past a woman in need, and a woman who found the courage to accept the help she was offered. Victoria and Cole Wyatt lived out their days on the ranch they had built together, surrounded by the family they had created and the love that had sustained them through 5 decades. They grew old together, their bodies failing, but their spirits remained strong until the very end. And when people asked Victoria about her secret to a long and happy life, she always gave the same answer. Find someone who sees you, really sees you, even when you can't see yourself. Then let them love you until you remember how to love yourself. That's the secret. That's everything. It was the truth, hard-won and deeply felt. And it all started with that first perfect kiss, the one that Victoria had been completely sober for, the one that Cole Wyatt had made sure was absolutely perfect. The kiss that had been the beginning of everything good in her life. She'd never been kissed sober before that day, but Cole had made sure her first real kiss was perfect. And in doing so, he'd given her a perfect life, full of love and joy and countless more perfect kisses to come. That was their story. That was their truth. And it was absolutely, completely perfect.